Hi, everyone. I'm Ethan Schwer. So welcome to Screen Time and Media, What We Know and Considerations During the Pandemic. So I'm going to give an introduction uh, professionally, and then also, kind of more of that personal connection too, because uh, I live and breathe this with my children as well. So professionally, I'm the Director of Diagnostics at Groves Academy, and I get the pleasure to work with Lori. On a more personal level, I've got four kids at ages 11, 10, 8, and 6. At one point, they were all 5 and under. And screen time is a big topic even within our house, even this morning. So summertime, the kids wanna play PlayStation and Nintendo, and so we've got PlayStation, we've got Nintendo, we've got movies. There's a lot of YouTube going on. When my kids were younger, we have a very good library of Disney movies, and I still hold on to those to this day. But we travel in the car and we play movies, and that was a big thing. So and things are evolving quite a bit. So I think this is a very good topic to talk about, especially I think it's been highlighted during this pandemic when we have been in front of screens, and we're in front of screens right now. So I'll let Lori introduce herself, and then we'll kind of jump in.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lori Kincaid. I have the pleasure of working with Ethan in the Learning Center at Groves Academy, and I am a school psychologist there, primarily doing neuropsychological evaluations. Very excited to meet you all and talk about screen time today.
Excellent. So um, usually I start off my presentations with something that's a little bit funny. So I'm going to attempt that. And some of this is funny. Some of this, we'll look at this and I think we'll get a little bit of a chuckle, but some of this also points to our realities now. And I was out to eat with my wife just recently, and one of the things I was preparing for this presentation, so this topic was front and center, and this was something that I saw. Okay, and I think we've all seen this. So my Lori, you can see my picture, right? Okay, all right. So screens are becoming much more something that we are using quite a bit, and they are affecting us. And we were sat down at a table and we were talking and talking about our days, and we noticed, and there was 3 or 4 other tables around us, and this is kind of what was happening. Instead of interacting with each other, they were both on their phones, and that isn't completely a bad thing, but it is a different way to connect and how we think about social connections. At times, I wonder if my family looks at it like this, okay? And I know there are times that we're like that. Now, the comical side of this is I do have a little bit of a video to show you. And so some of these I think are funny, and they're little accidents that happen because we are on our phone. So I'm going to share my screen. You're going to see a little bit of an ad here real quick, and then I'll skip the ads.
That is usually covered by her phone has finally made an appearance.
I just kept hearing it.
Oh, and this is the wrong video, so I apologize. Hold tight. And I wanted to start right about here. Some of these are funny, and you look, but some of them you look at me like, oh no, are they okay? I'm gonna close out of this now and get back to the presentation slides. Okay. And hold tight, I'm pulling up my notes page. All right, so, and I know some of those, I hope some of those were funny. I hope you had a chuckle with some of them. And we're going to be talking a lot more than with just with cell phones today. But we know that most of us have that screen right in our pocket, and that's something that we go to quite a bit. So, and so here's what we got set forth with our agenda. We're going to talk, what is recommended for screen time. Even within that, we're going to talk, what is screen time? What is that definition? And psychologists often use the term the operational definition. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the negative effects of screen time. I think those that are commonly what we center on. And there are some definite negative effects of screen time, but there are also some very strong benefits of screen time. And we're going to cover those as well. We're going to talk about considerations during the pandemic. Now, quite honestly, when we were preparing this and when we first were getting ready for this, we were right in the middle of the pandemic. So that was front and center. Well, now it kind of seems like we've got some traction. We're making some movement and maybe coming out of that. We're still going to talk about, some of those considerations, but they're not as central to this, this presentation as I originally planned. We're also going to talk about resources, and really we got one fantastic resource. We looked at a few different resources, but we found, and actually Lori found, this central hub that can be a great resource for you and your family, and helping guide us through screen time. So, this is a topic, like I said, that is near and dear, even within our personal lives. One thing that I want to talk about, Lori and I both want to make sure that we're very cautious with jumping into this, is we're not experts on this. And there are, while we might be talking about these things quite commonly, we don't follow these completely to a T in my household. So these are things that we can all be working on and all work to strive on when we talk about screen time. Lori, would you add anything to that?
No.
Okay. And if you have questions as we are talking, please feel free to start popping them in. And Lori and I, while I'm talking, I think Lori's going to try answering some of them, and then vice versa as well. So what is screen time? And so when we were pulling up some research articles that were talking about screen time and how they defined it, it really kind of was a mixed bag, and there wasn't a lot of strong operational definition of what it is. And so this is a definition that comes right out of the dictionary. Okay, so time spent watching television, playing a video game, or using an electronic device with a screen. I mean, it's pretty short, sweet, simple, and it's probably exactly what we're kind of thinking about when we talk about screen time. Any type of physical interaction with the screen is we're going to consider screen time, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
And when we're thinking about this definition of screen time, it's really important to consider how we engage with our screens. Because when we're considering the advantages and disadvantages of screen time, it can be really helpful to put them in one of these four categories to figure out the advantages and disadvantages, because truly screen time is not all equal. And how we engage with it is important to consider how it's going to impact us and our overall functioning. So let's kind of jump into these four different types of screen time. The first is passive consumption. So think about watching videos or listening to music. You're really passively engaging with that screen and the content on that screen. Next is more of your interactive consumption. So think playing games or browsing the internet. We are interacting with that screen. Next is communication, which is probably pretty self-explanatory. These are things like video chatting or social media. And then lastly is our content creation. So think things like creating videos, creating music, maybe some type of art application where you are creating art, but in more of that digital format. However, when we think about these four categories, they are a lot more fluid and dynamic than distinct and separate categories. And let me give you a couple of examples. Think about Facebook, for example. By definition, it would fit within that communication category as a social media platform. However, I'm sure we've all done this at some point. If we're, laying in bed and just simply scrolling on our phone, looking at our news feed, now that communication platform has turned into more of a passive consumption of screen time. Or another example would be watching a movie with let's say we have a little 3-year-old and we're watching that Disney movie that Ethan was talking about. But instead of placing them in front of a screen and having them watch that and passively consume it, we are sitting next to them and asking them questions about the characters or asking them what they think might happen next. We have turned that passive consumption into more of an interactive screen time activity. So really, I think when we think about this definition and as we navigate through these slides and talk about screen time, I do think it's important to really at the core of this think, how are we engaging with the screen? And that impacts what we take away from screen time.
So we're going to try an attempt, and I know this is a little bit different via Zoom. We want to talk about, is technology that involves screen time healthy for development? So this is where we'd like to little pause and see if you would add anything either into the Q&A, or if you'd be willing to share your thoughts and turn off your mic. So we would love to hear your thoughts and what you think.
Just a clarification, Ethan, with the webinar format, they can't take themselves off mute, but we could use the chat feature.
Excellent. So let's see if we can add some chat to that Q&A and see if you please share your thoughts on what you think about technology and, is it healthy for development?
Yeah, I see a response, maintaining friendships in a pandemic. Absolutely.
Yes. Now they are pouring in, so we'll try to read through these. So, yes, my son is very social and it helped him a lot during the pandemic. A great way for people to communicate, especially those who need extra processing time. Absolutely. TikTok and the creative process that goes involved in making TikTok. Yes, I mean, so definitely. Can Google info for any inquiry? Yes, that is excellent, right? Maybe also a little cause of concern too, right? Okay. Endless information, online encyclopedia, if you can find reputable sources.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That'll be even a topic that we talk about here in a little bit.
Ethan, I also keep seeing the word creative, a creative outlet. I've seen that across numerous responses, and we're going to be talking about that as a component of screen time as well.
I like the word balance.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of themes. I do see the theme with creativity, but I also see the themes with social connections,
Mm-hmm.
and it does easily help and makes that very efficient.
Mhm. I think this last comment is really interesting to me as well. Dialoguing about social concerns with a wide range of people. I think these platforms do give us a ability to communicate with diverse people that maybe we wouldn't have access to in our daily lives, depending on the networks that we're a part of.
Any more thoughts? Okay. Well, so I'm going to close out of my chat and move on to the next slide. So when they've done surveys on this, 4 out of 5 parents believe technology is helpful for child development. And I think that we can all agree with that. Or hopefully maybe you all agree, but it can be helpful in its right place, in the right setting. It can be extremely helpful, especially we talk about the pandemic. And I know that distance learning for many families didn't go super well, but it did help us and move us into this other platform and other method to deliver instruction when it might not have been completely safe for us to get together and interact in person. So there is a lot of positive aspects of technology. And I want to make sure that we will come back to that. We're going to be talking also a lot of those concerns around it. So just know that we're going to come back to some of those positive aspects too. So guidelines for technology use. Okay. Number 1 is, if you look at what is recommended, it is highly variable. One of the most cited organizations in the United States, anyways, is the American Academy of Pediatrics. And there is a little bit of consensus. If you look at the guidelines, they usually fall into this. But around the world, this changes quite a bit, even in the US. And depending on what website you go to, there is variation. So we don't have like very strict guidelines for technology consumption. And part of that is the research on this. A lot of the research, and I'm going to use some research terms there. There are a lot of the research articles are cross-sectional or correlational. So it makes it more difficult for us to make causal determinations of the effects of technology. But generally, you will see that before of age 2, there is a recommendation that there really is no technology use, okay, no screen time, with the exception of video chatting, okay. And a prominent Harvard psychologist writes about this quite a bit, and she notes that there really is no productive benefit for screen time before the age of 2, because our brains are hardwired to learn language, learn emotions, interactions. And if you have a child that is under 2 and you do the video chat, you will see, or more than likely see, some of the confusion of even using that. So one of our recommendations, and this is going to be connected with other slides, is that you use this technology with them. So if you're visiting with grandma or grandpa or someone else, it takes a little bit more understanding that this person on the screen is somewhere else. So, and that takes some cognitive development. Between the ages of 2 and 5, they recommend no more than 1 hour per day. And between 5 and 18, they recommend no more than 2 hours per day. Okay. So in our household, we try to stick with that. We're not always consistent with that. Yesterday was definitely one of those days where it was rainy. It was a little bit more gloomy, and they had friends over, and our kids consumed a lot more screen time. Now today it was a little bit sunnier. We were kicking our kids out the door and trying to get them out and limiting how much that they were using. So, but these are the general guidelines. If we talk about other countries, France, Australia, and Canada have recommended no television time for those that are 3 and younger. Okay. One of the things that came out that was very popular a few years ago was baby Einstein videos, where you'd watch these video clips and it was meant to stimulate your brain, and they'd have all these great colors and videos, and they would play Mozart and Beethoven and really meant to help aid with that cognitive development. And really, they are not recommended. And it's been a while since I've looked into this, but some of the initial findings that they found when kids were exposed to that, it actually increased attentional concerns. Things were flashing and moving. They didn't quite understand what was happening. And more of those kids that used those were diagnosed with ADHD later on. Lori, I think you had some information that you were going to talk a little bit about here too.
Yeah, it's really just an expansion of what you were talking about for video chatting for children under the age of 2, primarily due to that brain development that's happening so rapidly from, those ages from birth until 3. It's really just an anecdotal story. I video chat my niece who lives in a town nearby on a daily basis. I think she probably calls me 2 to 3 times a day with video chat. And some interesting observations that I noted were right around that age between 2 and 3, I saw her start taking the perspective of me and understanding that if she turned her camera, that she could show me things in her home. And she realized that I'm seeing things different than her. And then she would ask me that if I could come over to her home, and she knew that I was at my home. She would ask to see the kittens that I have at my house. So really, she started learning some of that perspective taking or exactly around this time that the research is supporting. So it's really just an anecdotal story to corroborate a lot of what Ethan is talking about with the research. And Ethan, we had a chat come in saying, can we have the link for the article about the increased attention issues with screen time for younger kiddos?
I do have at the end of this, that is an excellent question. At the end of this, we do have references for a lot of the citations that we have. So you're more than likely to go through and look at those. Many of these were articles that were online and didn't require access to a research journal subscription. So yes, by all means, go with that. And even if you even just Google like that, the baby Einstein videos and the detrimental effects of that, you'll find a lot of that information. So yes, we'll have some of that information. One of the other questions that came up, when my son is playing games with a couple of other kids on microphones, they do interact and creatively work together as part of a team. However, this doesn't happen so often, and the gaming is often too violent. We are going to talk specifically to this point, in that all screens aren't created equal in what they're doing, and the benefits and negative effects change by what type of interaction they are doing. And quite honestly, this comes from Carol. Some of the information that I might have about video games in particular, there's more positive benefits with those, even with those violent video games. So some of that might be surprising as we get there. Okay. All right. So one of the questions is, how much time do we spend on our screens? I mean, so we just went over those recommendations, right? So 2 hours per day. Okay. And this does, when they survey this, how much time do we spend on screens? That does vary on how they look at this. And there are some very interesting points here. So American children spend about 7 hours per day in front of electronic media based on report from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Now, generally, this is not including the school information. So if you are on a Chromebook, if you're on a PC doing work, so this is in addition to that. Okay. According to the CDC, okay, 8 to 10-year-olds spend 6 hours a day in front of a screen. 11 to 14-year-olds spend 9 hours a day. And it drops down a little bit for 15, 18. If you put this all together, it kind of matches up with that first bullet point. It probably is very close to that 7 hours per day. Now, the third bullet point is one that just was astonishing to me. And this one kind of really hit home. I was talking to my wife about this just even on our walk this morning. By the age of 7, many will have spent an entire year of their life in front of a screen. And just let that sink in just a little bit. A year of their life. Now, if you think of if a 7-year-old is really getting 10 to 12 hours of sleep per night, that's almost half of their life. Okay, so you add in 3.5 to 4 years where they are sleeping, you add another year, so that's 2 years that they are doing other things besides being in front of a screen or sleeping. Okay. A survey out of the United Kingdom shows that they have an average of 3 hours per day for 3 to 4-year-olds. 4 hours a day for 5 to 7-year-olds, 4.5 hours for 8 to 11-year-olds, 6.5 hours for teenagers. So you'll see a little bit of difference between what they are doing in the UK compared to here. So there is some differences based on your culture, your where you live, and maybe even what you have access to. Okay. 70% of children, when they're surveyed, think that their parents spend too much time on their phones. Okay. And then there are really, really large disparities between social economic groups. If we look at those that come from more disadvantaged backgrounds, that come from a lower social economic group, the amount of screen time increases considerably compared to those that come from more advantaged backgrounds. And there's multiple reasons and causes for that, but that's also something that you know, as we talk about screens, one of those things to consider. And you know, when we go over some of these negative things and some of these, you know, talking about how much time we're consuming, Lori and I also talked. I mean, we understand, we get it. With 4 kids, sometimes I just want to have a break for my kid, and you know, check out what is going on social media, or read the news. I mean, for me, I mean, that's generally, I don't do a lot with social media. That's my personal take, but I do read a lot of news, and sometimes that 15-20 minute, you know, if I have 15-20 minutes, I have a little bit of time to catch up on a few different things, or emails or whatever that might be. And one of the other things that we talked about is as parents, sometimes we use these opportunities to have children use their screens while we do something else. And that's something else that we completely get. That I have definitely had my kids turn on a movie or turn on a show while I mowed the lawn, or while I went and I took a shower or something like that. So I mean, there are aspects of this that can be positive and that can be helpful with that. Lori, did you want to add anything to that? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the negative effects. So first, we're going to talk about cognitive development. Okay? And I'll read off some of these bullet points on this slide, and then add a little bit more information that I have in the background here. So they have found that children's cognitive development is down almost 2 years in relation to where it was 30 years ago. And there's loss of concrete and abstract thinking. And they attribute this a lot to the increase in screen time and the less interaction with others that the screen time affects. Okay? They have found that more screen time at 24 months leads to lower scores on behavioral, cognitive, and social tests at 36 months. Toddlers exposed to more screen time are at a higher risk for expressive language delays. every 30 minutes increase for those under 2, there is a 49% increase in delays. Okay. So, but there is a caveat to this one. So one of the things, and I'm looking at my notes and seeing where it's at here. So if you are there's a difference with this is if we are supervising children and working with them with these screen times, and this is going to be a big point throughout the rest of our presentation, if we consume this with them and teach them how to interact with it, there are a lot more positive benefits. So preschool children, and this was the point I was trying to find, so the preschool children with more unsupervised time with electronics had lower scores on intelligence, attention, and social skills. But this did not occur when they looked at this, when there was supervised time. As the parents were consuming this with their child, they did not see those lower scores of intelligence, attention, and social skills because there was more time to have that social connection and talk about it. Beyond cognitive development. Going back to my notes, I clicked the wrong button, so I'm missing some of my notes. So hold tight. Okay. Academics, we have seen that there can be some very negative effects with academics. A Cambridge study saw a drop of academic outcomes even with an extra hour of screen time each day. One of the biggest ones that I am probably worried about with my kids is sleep. And personally, we, unless they are working on schoolwork and their electronics come out of the room at night, this can negatively impact their sleep. So the blue light that inhibits the release of melatonin, and then games and apps stimulate our brains in ways that books do not. So they can make it harder for us to initiate sleep. Okay. 90% of studies in one systematic review found that adverse association between screen time and sleep. Okay. So now, quite honestly, there's a point where I'm being a little hypocritical when I'm bringing up these and I say my children don't have screens. My wife and I, we have a TV in our bedroom. And there are times at night where we are scrolling through our social media right before we go to bed. So while we're setting up these healthy routines for our kids, I don't always follow these and model them super well. Health, screen time has been strongly associated with obesity and vision problems. I'm going to go back to the previous slide because I have a few more notes that I didn't put right into these slides. It also has some other adverse health effects. There's increased use of technology has affected our posture, commonly referred to as text neck. So a lot of those that physical therapists and others that work on posture and other things, they have found that if you were constantly looking down your phone, it will decrease your posture and put a lot more stress on your spine. And so they actually recommend that if you have your phone that you are looking at it up here, so you are not constantly putting that pressure on your neck. Okay. We also have plenty of evidence that shows that increased screen time has especially with smartphones, has increased traffic accidents and fatalities. And a real example of this was the video that we showed in the beginning of the session. People are spending more focused time on their screens. And there were numerous times we were watching where someone almost got hit by a bus or a car and they're not paying attention to where they're at. In one analysis out of the UK, they found that for every 30 minutes of decreased screen time, it led to a lower mortality risk. And a lot of this was connected with if you're spending less time with your screen time, you're being more active and you weren't engaging in sedentary behaviors, which we know is very much connected to a lot of adverse health outcomes, including heart disease, obesity, and many other things. So decreasing your screen time is probably going to increase your active time. When we talk about social learning theory, Social learning theory talks about that the need to curb violent video games. And there have been some meta-analyses that show that there are more violent and aggressive thinking and behaviors for those that play more of those violent video games. And so this really talks to what we need to be, when we talk about children and video games, we need to be engaged in what they are doing, and know that there are adverse effects by spending too much time immersed in media and screen time. All right, some of the positive effects, I'm just making sure that there's no chats or anything coming in. While there's a lot of negative effects that are out there, there are certainly positive components to more screen time. A lot of the positive effects are centered around two areas. One is playing video games, and the other one is making those social connections through like a FaceTime or a video chat. So video games have been connected to small increases in reading skills. They have been connected with improving visual spatial skills. And if you think Minecraft, I mean, you can see how this would work out for kids. Problem solving. There's a lot of games that make you think and make you do some sort of problem solving. So that can help with some of your cognitive development. Okay. Also, we can build social connections. And we covered a little bit of this earlier. It allows you to reach out and connect with people that are far away, or just very quickly, like even if they're not far away, it increases the efficiency of being able to connect to someone that you might not be able to that day. And you might be able to connect with a wider array of people. Now, one of the things I talked about is the problem solving. And I want to be kind of careful when I talked about how these games can improve problem solving, and they can. But we also got to be a little bit wary of that. There's a lot of apps out there, and there's actually some organizations out there that say that we can improve your attention, and we can improve your working memory and how quick you process information. And by far and large, the research on that shows that those types of programs and those applications are not overly effective in improving some of your brain functioning. Now, with that being said, in certain populations, it can. So especially with more of your geriatric populations, they have found that it can help with attention, memory, and some of the aging effects, especially with playing video games. Even shooter video games have been shown to increase the ability to visualize things in more of a 3D setting. And when we look at the timing of when violent video games have come out, and more of those shooter type of video games, the federal government has done a lot of analyses on this, and there's some federal organizations that have found a significant decrease in violent crimes among adolescents since 1996, which coincides very much with the increase of violent video games. And when they talk about a lot of the violence that is occurring, and one of the things that a lot of times gets sucked into, like when there's a school shooting, are the kids playing violent video games? Are they doing Grand Theft Auto, or and I don't even know all the video games, but that's a common thing that is brought up. And generally the thought process when they analyze is it's not the video games that is a causal mechanism. It's a lot more of those other mental health and other things that are affecting those children. And it's not a direct connection with the violent in video games. So now, with that being said, am I saying that, hey, we should go out and we should be playing violent video games? And that's not my message here. But my message is that maybe some of this does desensitize us and helps us process information that we would no longer go and act out in those situations. Okay, I'm looking at a few of my other notes. Now, this is a pandemic related one. It can really decrease being socially isolated. And I don't think that we are meant to always be doing a video chat or a Zoom or FaceTime, but it has really allowed us to connect with others that when there's other parameters in place, such as distance, a pandemic, or something else like that. So it can be a very powerful tool. Okay, so I've done lots of talking, so I'm going to let Lori talk now.
Thanks, Ethan. I think it's so important to understand these advantages and disadvantages that Ethan touched on. But I want to bring us back and ground us in this idea that how we engage with screen time is so important. So I encourage us to critically analyze our use and our children's use. So let's observe our children to see how are they engaging with this content. And what I want us to think about is consider the 4 C's. And this comes right from commonsensemedia.org. Really, the most valuable experience for us and our children when it comes to screen time can focus on one of these 4 things. The first one is connection. Are we having a personal level of connection with the screen time that we are engaging with? Do we really identify with the characters in a movie? Are the values of characters aligned with ours? Maybe we're engaging with video creation or art creation that aligns with our interests and our values. Are we connecting with the material, or are we just simply passively consuming all of the screen time? Second, some of you already noted this, creativity. Are we really allowing ourselves and our children to create new content? Think about leveling up in a new video game, creating art. I'm thinking about one client that I worked with, and his visual spatial skills were out of this world, and he wanted to go and be a graphic designer or potentially even like build buildings and those types of things. And his mom found him an application where he was able to build actual buildings, kind of like a CAD software. And he was doing this 4 to 5 hours a day. And the mom approached me and said, "Is this much screen time okay?" And I said, "Absolutely it is," because that type of screen time is different than engaging in it in a really passive way. Next is our critical thinking skills. I encourage us to look to media that allows us to really take a deep dive into specific topics or skills or subjects. For example, if we're playing a video game, are our children or us having to strategize or having to use strategies to go around obstacles or to solve problems? Or maybe they are being part of a social media platform where they're discussing and wrestling with all of these different ethical dilemmas or social issues that our world faces. I think a lot of times when we think about educational screen time, we automatically think to educational programs where we plop our kid in front of a screen and have them consume information, and maybe they're doing, question and answer format type of engagement. And although this might seem fun and educational, it might not really allow our children to develop those critical analysis skills or engage with it at that deeper level that we want them to. And then lastly, you guys, if I could star anything in this presentation, it would be this last bullet point, and that is context. And what Ethan and I mean by this is, let's help our children really understand how media fits in to the bigger world and into their life. For younger children, for example, we're being with them when they engage with a video. We can ask them questions about what they're taking away, about what those characters might do, about how those characters might be feeling in their states. And we're really talking about how media fits within our greater world. This is just one component of our life. It's not all of our life. And for older children, we're really talking about social media because that's really what a lot of their life focuses on. And that really brings us to our next slide, Ethan, if you want to move that over. Oh, you're muted, Ethan.
It does. And actually, I was going to, as we move into the social media, I was going to take a small break here before I moved into this next slide, before we start talking about it too much. Well, and maybe I can move into the next slide. I would love to hear, before we start this discussion on social media, kind of what your perceptions are of social media, and especially in the context of your children using it. And you know, what are some things that worry you about social media, and what are some things that you really like about social media? So if we could take some time, just like we did on one of those previous slides, is add in some of our thoughts involving social media and our kids' usage of it. So please add in some chats and yep. Okay. I've got a comment on audiobook reading, and so we can cover that and hold on, Jan. I think that is a very good topic. So mental health procrastinating is coming up. We'll give a few more moments for people to find that chat function and add in a few more things, what they are either worried about or what they like about social media and their kids' interaction with it. Okay, so one comment is, I don't love how surface level their texts are.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a teen in the 80s, we were always on the phone. They are sending LOL, 3-word sentences. There's not a lot of social exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't email, it's all shorthand. Exposure to negative content. As a parent, this is one of those things that I worry about. Positive, forum for sharing ideas with a larger community. Negative, enables monolithic viewpoints. Okay. I do like the Instagram social media because they are sending pictures. Same as Snapchat. But there's pressure to be snapping everyone every day. And so funny thing with that is I moved over to Instagram and I don't do any Facebook or anything because I felt personally, so this is my personal take, I felt Facebook was a little bit too negative, a lot of negative. And so I like that where I was connected with my other peers my age, where they would send pictures of their kids and so forth. But this is a really good point. Worry about the image or perception to have the perfect life. And this is definitely something I'm going to be touching on. Sexual texting and cyberbullying, absolutely. But positive, on group text, my son feels like he is part of the group. Okay. Looking at this from the perspective of dyslexia, you know, do we have hope that there are improvements in ebooks that allow them to better mirror or have more book-like and non-screen experience? Oh, that's an excellent question too. Okay. Okay. Excellent, excellent. And I think we'll be able to bounce off a lot of these comments. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think I see one in the Q&A. And I can start answering that Q&A question as you jump in here, Lori, to this one.
Okay. So, of course, we couldn't do a presentation on screen time without talking about social media. It has been such a big part of everyone's lives these days, but especially our children's lives as they have really grown up immersed in all of these different platforms. And I think this idea of social media creates a lot of anxiety for parents, especially older parents that didn't grow up in those platforms. But there are a lot of positive aspects to it as well, as you are all noting in that chat screen as well. And we just need to be mindful of some of the negative aspects and how to address these things and talk to them with our children. And really remember that one thing that I was starring with that context, talking about screen time and media and how it fits within our children's lives and how they should engage with it in a healthy way is really my main take home point. But let's talk about some of these negative aspects and what to take away. The first one, which was brought up in the chat as well, is bullying. I think back in the day, before screen time and before social media became as big of concepts as they are today, children were still bullied, but they were bullied at school, they were bullied on the bus, they were bullied on a playground, and then they could escape it. They could go home to their safe environment with their parents and still have a place where they weren't bullied. Where in today's day and age, there are group texts that they are a part of, there's social media that they are a part of. And if they are being bullied, it can be very hard to escape that. And what it can look like, and I have a little sister who's going through high school, and this has happened to her. What it can look like is maybe in group messages, people are ganging up on adolescents or children. It can also look like kind of more of your passive bullying on social media, leaving people out and creating events and not inviting people, or more of your direct bullying of directly messaging someone and bullying them. So it's being mindful that these things could occur and making sure that we're having conversations with our children. If these things are happening, how do we intervene as adults and parents in their life to make sure that our children are able to escape that if they need to? And if there's any other specific questions about how to address that bullying, just let us know. I know that that was brought up in the chat. The next topic, which was brought up in the chat as well, you guys are reading our minds, is sexting and a lot of that sexual abuse that can occur within these social media platforms, whether that be from someone that they know or a stranger. And really, when you think about this, it's all about appropriate parental monitoring. And there are different ways within these social media platforms where we as parents can monitor it and make sure that we know who they are engaging with, what they are posting, and what those people that they are engaging with are saying to them. But it is also about teaching them about safe use. So we are communicating with them about their privacy settings and making sure they understand how to set up those privacy settings. We are talking with them about how they are not going to accept friend requests from people that they don't know, from strangers. And if anyone does reach out to them, that they need to let us know immediately and that we can intervene as adults in their life. It can also potentially mean banning social media use until they get old enough to understand, these repercussions as well. And we can talk through that if you guys have, specific questions. From what I know, Ethan, and jump in if you have any other thoughts. I didn't see any general guidelines on what age to start social media, and I think there are varying opinions on that.
From what I read on the Common Sense Media, and we're going to show you this, I think there's more and more information as you start moving into those middle school years. And I think that's kind of, I think you'll find a lot more resources and supports as you move into those middle school years, as you're talking about social media. And I think just from an anecdotal observation, I think that's more often when we see more consuming of that is right around that age.
Yeah. The next topic, which you brought up in the chat as well, is about this idea of people are posting their best selves on social media. And oftentimes people are scrolling and looking at other people's social media and thinking, wow, they have a far better life than I do. They have more friends, they do funner things, they get to, do all these other things that I don't get to do. So it's talking with our adolescents about social media in the greater context of the world, that what we post on social media doesn't equate to our value as a person. And talking to them about how a lot of people use social media. A lot of people use social media to only post all of the things that are going well in their life. And they are oftentimes not posting all of the challenges that they are facing. And that's across everyone. So just educating our adolescents about how social media is typically used so that this is not impacting their self-esteem. And similarly, this identification of self-worth, talking about, your self-worth is not attached to the number of friends that you have, the number of likes that you have on a picture. Your self-worth is detached from your social media experience. You just get to use social media to share stories and share pictures. That's what social media is for. But your identity and your value is separate from that platform. The next topic, which you guys brought up as well, I feel like you guys brought up every single one of them, is fake news. And really that negative content that individuals are engaging with in social media. And this takes a lot of conversation with our children as well, talking to them about how to discern if a news source is fake or not. How do you look up your own research to figure out if that is fake news or not? And if they feel consumed by all of this negative information on social media, how do you remove yourself from that to then elevate your mental health and re-engage when you feel ready? Again, it's this reoccurring theme of these things are going to take a lot of in-depth conversations with our children and adolescents. A couple of last things that I think are important to mention: geotagging and sharing locations. Back in the day, Ethan shared this with me. I did not know this, that back in the day, our location was automatically shared when we uploaded a photo or a post. That has since changed, and we actually have to add our location now. But this is something to talk about with our children and adolescents, that they should not be sharing their location for a variety of safety reasons. Similarly, talking to them about how what they post now is going to be with them, and that could impact them and affect their future. So talking to them about privacy settings, but also talking to them about what do we actually post on social media and how do we use it and engage with that. So I would say overall common tips that we came up with: look at children's privacy settings, see who they are interacting with, manage their social media accounts until you think they can manage it independently, and have a lot of in-depth conversations about social media use and how it fits into the greater world in their life. Ethan, what would you like to add?
I think you covered a lot of that. So, and did super well. So, we talk about taking that developmental framework with this. As we enter into this, even when I can recall conversations with my 2-year-old and 3-year-old. You go through the Target checkout line, and we'd have conversations in the car, and how that's different from when they became 6 and 7 and 10 and 11, and they see a lot of the social things that are going all along with it, and we're able to have those conversations, and it helps build them as a person. But the same thing goes within our social media. Is there's many different things that are being posted, and how do we I keep using the word consume that. How do we interpret that? How do we use that information? And how do we let that fit into our personal life and how we view the world? And that takes a little bit of practice, and we shouldn't expect our kids to be independent with this right from the get-go. They need our support and our guidance with this because it is something that is difficult to manage. And I grew up with a lot of this. A lot of the social media came about while I was in college. And it still took a lot of navigating for someone that used technology on a day basis on how to learn how to navigate and, where do I fit in with this? Some of the helpful tips, even the geotagging, I think that even goes beyond even children. One of the recommendations with social media is I love going to a Twins game and seeing them at a Twins game. And it's one of those things that you don't think about, but like if I'm on vacation, and one of the articles I was reading as I was preparing for this is you don't think about this, but I'm in the Bahamas and I want to share with everyone, hey, look at this awesome experience I'm having, but I'm also telling the world I'm not home. And you have increases in burglaries and break-ins during these times where you are sharing and where you are at and televising. But the same thing happens with kids. If I am here and I'm posting this picture and my parents aren't around, or it can present a lot of other problematic scenarios. So we just got to be very careful about how we are sharing information and how much of that information we are sharing.
Ethan, there was a chat question. I just want to make sure that I reiterate these points. The question was, what were our strategies that we recommended for social media use? And I'll just touch on them again. It is looking and monitoring at their privacy settings, seeing who they are interacting with and what they are saying to them. In addition to that, which is what Ethan is talking about, is engaging in that social media use with them until they are ready to do it independently. What that would look like is having their usernames and passwords and logging on with them and helping them engage with that content until they're ready to do it independently. And lastly, which I'm going to star again, I think it's the most important, it's having conversations with them about all of those different things that we touched on, whether it be bullying, self-image, fake news, geotagging, how it's going to impact them in their future later on. All of these things are things that they should have a good grasp on before they engage with that material independently.
Yes, excellent. I don't see any more questions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, my kids are not on social media yet, and I'm sure there's going to be a time real soon where they are. But our kids are texting and they are interacting through those means. And this also, I think, speaks within that developmental framework. And one of the things that I never even considered was we just bought our two older kids a cell phone. So they had their very, very first cell phone. And a lot of the other kids their age already had them. And we were like, that is unnecessary. We don't need that. And we were holding off on that. But we also saw how that was affecting some of our kids and how they were interacting and kind of left them out. And a funny story with that is we had a home phone, and my oldest son, his friend said, like, how come you didn't come join us? We texted you. And they were texting our home phone line, and didn't know. And my oldest son actually had to explain to them, this is what a home phone is, and it's one of those things you don't think of. But he was being left out of some of these social connections because he didn't have a phone, and that's how everyone was communicating. So there are some positive benefits and some even within that developmental framework that we're talking about. These are things also to consider. So I see a couple more chats. I'm making sure that. Okay, we got. Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead, Ethan.
One person said that they have heard of DuckDuckGo as a good option for privacy geotagging protection. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so we do have some more tips and tricks for you. So that's what we're going to go into next. Okay, so general tips and tricks, and I'm going to show you one of the resources uh, that we have used within our household as well. So one, charge devices in parents' room at night. Okay? We are very similar. We don't charge our kids' devices in our room, but they have a central location where they put it. Use applications to limit screen time. There are a lot of applications that can help you with this journey and help you make sure that they are doing things on that developmental level that will make you feel more comfortable. Okay. Electronic TV monitoring devices, contingent feedback systems. So if we're looking at, how does the using this type of media, how does that make you feel? How are we engaging to see what kind of feedback we are receiving from our kids? We can also use clinic-based counseling. One of the major concerns is the addictive nature of technology and how this is being used. And so if that is the case and we're getting off and we're using this too much, or if there's other applications where we might need counseling involved with this, that is a good option. Definitely introduce screen breaks. And I know a lot of families do this. I know a lot of families that they'll go to their cabin and that'll be time where they step away from their screens. 5-minute warnings using visual timers. This is how much time you have left. Okay. Support other activities, get them out, keep them being active. One of them that I want to show you was our contract. I'm going to share you screen. And this was my wife and I, when we jumped on to buying our kids a cell phone, we made a contract where we had them sign and we went through this line by line. And so this is an example, and we use, there are tons of options that are out there. And if you Google contracts, you're going to get lots of ideas. And this is what we came up with. We kind of put a few of them together. And you will see on here is that any social media is off limits at this point in time. Okay. And so far, we're still pretty new into the phone area, but this has worked extremely well. And they were just super excited to have a phone that they signed off on this right away. And we've had to refer to this very little, and they've done an excellent job. But having that conversation at the forefront was extremely helpful for us.
A question for you, Ethan, that says, can you share the contract?
I'd be happy to share the contract. I can. Joanna, is this something that I can send to you that you can send to others if they ask for it?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Another question for you, Ethan. The clinic-based counseling with specific counselors, are there any that deal with screen use specifically? If so, do we have any specific names or recommendations?
I am unaware of any of them that are that specific. How about you, Lori? Do you know of anyone there that's okay?
Not any specifically, no.
All right. I'm going back. I'm just trying to get back to my presentation. Do we need to maybe just spend just a little bit more looking over this and make sure that everyone got to see this? Any more questions on the contract before I move back into the presentation? Okay. Oh, I am. Slowly making my way back. There we are.
A question about the contract, Ethan. Did you have the kids offer their input when you created this?
Do you want me to be funny in my response, or we often tell our kids that our household is not a democracy; it is a dictatorship. Uh, so a lot of these things, they don't have a choice with. That's the funny thing. We did talk about this, and we talked about, this was really for their safety and so forth, and that having a phone does have a lot of responsibility. So there was a lot of talking that was involved with that. But I do love the dictatorship comment, and then we can talk about government too and how they're set up too. So that blends into another conversation. Okay.
I think a lot of those recommendations that you talked about, Ethan, about ways to decrease screen time also gets at what another person put in the chat earlier on with social media use, which is their worry about their children feeling like they need to be snapping all the time, this pressure of needing to engage with friends. And I have seen numerous clients that have reported that they have anxiety and mental health issues because they feel so overwhelmed about this pressure to engage in social media, especially if they have a lot of friends and they're really social people. So I think a lot of those recommendations that you had of ways to decrease screen time helps our children to separate themselves from that in a healthy way.
Oh, see another chat coming in.
Yeah, Carol was responding to, if you don't snap every day, you lose the thread with a friend. It's considered rude not to. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's hard, right? As a kid growing up, and I mean this, our friends are our life, and so forth, and and as we grow older, I'd say more of us are like, I don't care if I post, or I don't care how many likes I have, that changes, but in the moment, that is very, very hard.
I think it's also, I think our children might need help in how to navigate some of those social interactions and social exchanges. So, helping them figure out, how do I respond, and maybe let my friends know that I need a break, or I'm not going to be responding for a day, or if they don't respond for a day, letting them know that they're still there, and they still care about them, but they just needed to step away for a little bit. So really helping them navigate those situations might help those friendships.
So considerations during the pandemic. Okay. So hopefully we don't go back and into the way of where we need to isolate and where things get shut down again. I'm very, very hopeful for that. But in case that does happen, I think one of the words that has been used a lot during this pandemic is the word grace. And I think we need to give ourselves a little bit of grace in using this, and maybe consuming a little bit more screen time, but we need to continue to have that balance. And when we talk about balance, it might not be 50-50. We might be spending a little bit more time on screens. And we know that it can help decrease isolation. But we should loop this back to some of those slides that Lori talked about. Is we need to talk about the context. We need to talk about what type of screen use are they using. Are they using this to engage and connect with others, or are they just passively watching something, or just spending all the time in front of a TV? So it all depends on what they are using and how they are using it. And coming back to, we're probably going to need a little bit more grace and a little bit more screen time if we are not able to communicate and interact socially on an individual basis. So anything else that you would add there, Lori? Okay. Two more chats. I'm just checking and make sure. I'm still on the contract. Oh, that's from Lori. Okay, new share. Okay, so now, Lori, am I on the, are we seeing the right thing now? Okay. All right. So resources, we want to provide this to you, and we're going to open up this website. But if you want to get out your phones and take a big a picture of this QR code, and you can follow along with us, or you can use your web browser and stuff to come into and talk and follow along with some of these resources. I'm going to let Larry Lori take over here and kind of walk us through Common Sense Media.
Okay, Ethan, can you see the screen now?
It is, yep. It's there.
Wonderful. Okay, so Ethan and I debated on what resources to give you all, and we have articles, different websites, and we decided to really give you one resource because this is a wonderful one-stop shop for you as parents to get really high quality information that's research-based about screen time, about social media use, and about any other questions you have about really technology with kids in general. And I want to walk us through this. So this is commonsensemedia.org. And what they have here is a wonderful Parents Need to Know tab. Under this tab, it allows you to look up information by the age of your child. So if you have an age-specific question, you can go here and click on, okay, I want to learn about preschoolers. And they have various information about preschoolers on this slide. They also have information presented by topic. So for example, if you are debating about getting a cell phone for your child and you want to know about all the research with cell phones, there is a cell phone tab. If you are having more questions about social media after the conversations we had today, there is a social media tab. Privacy and online safety. We talked a lot about privacy settings and those types of things. Violence in the media. We briefly touched on this today, but there's a lot more research to dive into with violence in the media. Let's dive into screen time because that's really what our presentation is about today. So within every one of these topics, what this website gives you are all of these different facts, answers, and questions regarding that topic. For example, how much screen time is okay for my kids? This is where Ethan and I are gathering some of our information even for this presentation. So you might see some overlap, but really a lot of the questions that I'm sure you have as parents are going to be within this platform. It also gives you 170 articles about screen time. You have, if you're looking for research or different articles to support some of the things you're wondering, I'm sure you can get access to it here. Same thing with videos, 27 videos, things that you can watch in regards to screen time. So this is just one of those areas, but a really good example of all the different components of each one of these topics. The other really cool thing, the Parents' Ultimate Guide to. If you have questions about some of these platforms that your children are using, like Minecraft, Google Classroom, Fortnite, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, Zoom, Messenger Kids, all of these things are things that you can learn more about. If you have questions, you can click on these and look into that. So really, we thought this was a wonderful one-stop for you as parents to navigate. Ethan, do you have anything else that you want me to click on or show them in regards to commonsensemedia.org?
Yeah, underneath that, Parents Need to Know.
Yes.
If you go underneath the privacy and online safety.
Yep.
Okay, so there's a lot of resources underneath here that will tell you like what type of apps or programs to use to help with your safety. So there's a lot of resources here to curb how much screen time they're using, to protect privacy settings and so forth. So so underneath this one, that is a great spot to look.
Anything else, Ethan?
No.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll hand it back to you.
Okay. And I don't think, let me share my screen and see if there's anything else within the presentation. That was really it. We do have our contact information. If you do have questions, we'd be happy to answer them. And like I said, we've got our references that are listed. So let's see if we have any more questions. Okay. All right. So that is it. Any more questions before we finish up with our presentation? And please feel free to log off if it's coming up to a time where it doesn't, where you have other obligations. I think Lori and I can both stick around. I can anyways, if it goes past 1 o'clock and we have questions.
Ethan, I do think that something we have not addressed yet, that it looks like the questions are coming up again, is in regards to audiobooks.
That audiobooks, that is a very much a tough one. An addiction to them. And it does depend a little bit on the context that you're using these audiobooks. You know, is this a technology resource that you are using to help with, you know, with dyslexia and you know, how much? So the addiction question would be, how much is this affecting their functioning? You know, are they using it so much where they're not interacting with others their age? Are they not really doing anything else? Are they not having as much fun with other activities or willing to join other activities? So so your question is directed towards, I see that it is with dyslexia. This is a little bit of a harder question to answer because there is so many positive benefits of these audiobooks, because it gives them access to content and information that they might not otherwise get, right? So we want to be able to continue to allow that access to information, because that is going to help them grow academically and cognitively. But we don't want it to consume their life. So is creating that healthy balance, and I wonder if Lori would have the same answer as me. My recommendation would be, if it is really running their life, is to look at kind of a counseling and see if we can monitor that and have that be at a more healthy level where they are using those audiobooks. Lori, would your answer to that change?
I'm trying to look back to her original question because I think we might be misunderstanding her question, Ethan.
Okay.
Okay, I think, no, this might be it. Looking at this from a perspective of dyslexia, do you have hope that there will be improvements in ebooks that allow them to better mirror a more book-like and non-screen experience?
I think Jen answered. You know, hopefully I answered Jen's question. The ebooks, that is another one, and then we have one from Carol too. So I think that's, Jen, if I didn't answer that, please feel free to chat in and ask me to clarify. So if I misclarified your question, please add in. or please communicate that with us. Carol. Spanish is not audiobooks. So Carol, is your question about learning like a foreign language like Spanish through audiobooks and not doing the interactive? Am I interpreting your question correctly?
So her original question, Ethan, was what do you think about Spanish textbooks, etc. online? I feel like my son is learning nothing through these tools and it's so much worse than learning vocab with a live teacher. So really comparing that on the screen ability to learn a second language compared to with someone right in front of them.
Do you want to take a stab at that one, Lori?
And Ethan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have consumed some research that has shown that we do comprehend better with an actual physical reading material in front of us. There are aspects of that. So that would be the only, research that I've consumed regarding that topic.
And I think, context matters with a lot of these questions when we talk about individual kids. So some kids can learn very well, and we do know that research, when we talk about overall learning, if you use that like a multimodal approach, like Lori said, you have your textbook in front of you, you have some interaction, and you're able to apply it in different settings. Yes, that is going to make a big difference. But are there some kids out there that can have a textbook in front of them and pick up a language? Absolutely, yes. There are kids that will not be as effective at all. So that's probably what's going to take some trial and error. And I think the best approach would be to incorporate a multimodal approach to the learning, and that should really assist with the development of Spanish. Okay.
I think the last question that I see, Ethan, is really when you think about individuals with dyslexia, I think they use a lot of different apps to help them read things online. So they're getting it in that audio format. But it ends up being a lot of screen time because they are looking at that screen and they're tracking it on a screen to help them read that material. So is that screen time okay? I guess is, I think, the underlying question. And I would say if that's their way to engage with written material, and that's a accommodation that helps them to be able to comprehend what they're reading and take away meaning from text, I'm a lot less concerned about that type of screen time compared to a lot of the other screen time that we talk about.
And do we hope that things become, like when we talk about ebooks or other types of visuals for those that are reading through those technologies, do we hope that those become better and more like realistic? My answer to that would definitely be yes. But my answer would be 100 spot on exactly what Lori said. Okay, and so Beth, I'm reading through your comments and your question, and that is very difficult. This is a difficult question to answer, and if you have that hunch where the technology isn't being as beneficial for your son, and are there other ways to access it? I think we do need to explore that. So I think we should kind of go with a little bit of that gut feeling, and if something is off, what else is out there that can also help enhance your son's learning and have this be as real as possible. If if you want a few other resources that are out there, I mean, you can always email Lori and me, and we'd see if we could help you with that, and see if we could dive into that question that kind of fits your specific thoughts with that. Any more questions? We're talking about screen time and trying to interpret the questions through a screen and not having that real personal interaction. It is difficult. So I hope that you are being patient with us as we're trying to approach these questions. Okay, I don't see any more coming in. So if there are any more questions, you do have our email address. I will share my contract with Joanna, and so we have that resource available. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone.